Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really exciting to see we're about 120 people on. Thank you for sharing all of your countries, where you're from. It's really awesome. I am also chatting. I'm also in the chat. So my name is Adar. I'm not marked in any specific or special way. So if you guys have questions and stuff like that throughout this webinar, I'm very, very happy to respond. Hi, David. And thank you guys for being here with us. It's very exciting for us at Think Tank Training Center to join ArtStation for their student week. So my name is Adar, like I mentioned, and I'm the director of Think Tank Online, which is part of Think Tank Training Center. We received a bunch of portfolios for review, so we sent out the form on our socials. I noticed a question someone asked if it's only for Think Tank student. No, it's not. And we received a bunch. Some of them didn't quite have to do with the subjects that we have today. We have some amazing professionals here, and they are very specific and specialized in their own respective industries. So the artists that will be joining me today after the video will be Raffael Frank, Frederic, Arsenault, and Chun Yang. And we're gonna just show you guys a quick video about the school, and then we're going to jump in right away to introducing these wonderful artists, and we will start reviewing portfolios. I hope you guys have fun. I'm in the chat. If you guys have any questions about the school or other questions, I'm very happy to respond. Let's do this.
Think Tank Training Center offers 16 months of intensive instruction, creating capable CG professionals, catering to the needs of special effects and post-production departments in the world's top video game, film, and TV studios. Our asset creation program covers creatures and characters, environments, props, and vehicles. Additionally, we teach sculpting, life drawing, compositing, matte painting, rigging, character animation, and visual effects, producing well-rounded graduates with relevant, real-world experience. The foundation term equips new students with broad, basic skills necessary to progress into the intermediate term, where they begin to specialize. As they move into the advanced and mentorship terms, they narrow their focus to a specific discipline as they work towards producing a world-class portfolio, readying themselves for the rigors of a professional production environment. Dedicated class supervisors head up small groups of students. These are working professionals at the top of their game, representing the finest talent in the world today. Under the guidance of these elite artists, you'll create natural connections to the industry, which often lead to positions at top-tier studios. Come join us at Think Tank Training Center, either on campus at the foot of the mountains in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, or with your feet up from the comfort of your own home with our online program. Either way, our doors are always open. Perhaps now's the time to step through and join the global Think Tank family.
All right, welcome back. So I will jump right into it. We want to have as much time as we can for portfolio reviewing. I will start by introducing the guys, or two guys and one girl. Raffael Frank, maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself.
All right. Hey, guys. Can you hear me? I'm unmuted. Perfect. So I'm Raffael. I keep this short as well, just so we can go into portfolios. I'm originally from Switzerland. I came over to Canada 7 years ago with actually attending a school as well. Didn't do Think Tank back then, but if I knew better, I would have. After school, I didn't work in this industry before, so I have to mention that as well. I come from a completely different background, more photography oriented, and CG was always like a hobby for me. So I was doing it on and off, just like mostly modeling and yeah, you guys know the drill. And I came over to Vancouver for school, and after school I got hired straight into Image Engine. That was an amazing start for me because I didn't expect it to start with feature films right away. So at Image Engine I got the chance to work on Independence Day, Resurrection, then Game of Thrones, Final Fantasy, the movie, and that was a pretty cool start. After that, I moved for a 6-month contract to Zoic, which was more like TV show oriented, which is a nice experience as well because TV works much, much faster. So sometimes you're still modeling stuff and it airs the next day. So it was kind of crazy experience coming from film where you have much more time than going to TV. And so I worked on a couple TV shows like Arrow, Unfortunate Events, and Beyond, some stuff I haven't even seen because I think it didn't go far. Some of those shows just don't go really far. And I have to say, I always worked as a modeler. And my interest for characters was, becoming bigger and bigger at that time. So, but I wasn't doing any character work at that point of time, just in my spare time. So after SOIC, I got then from my school mentor asked, he worked at that time at Digital Domain, so he asked me to come over to work on Ready Player One, which was for me super exciting. Spielberg production, Ready Player One. I loved the book already, so I was pretty hyped about that. Moved over to Digital Domain and started there as a modeler as well. Worked a lot of like Ready Player One assets at that time. Did modeling work on Thor, on Infinity War, Avengers, Endgame. And in my time at Digital Domain, I slowly then transitioned more towards character work, started with DJ doubles, but was always interested in just pure facial work. And I got closer to the facial team in Digital Domain and slowly transitioned into that team where I'm part of it right now since a couple of years. And basically what we do is just sculpt likenesses, or we just sculpt blend shapes. We make sure that animators have all the beautiful fleshy blend shapes to work with, that they can hit the expressions they need to hit. And that ranges from more like creature work, if you want to call Thanos a creature, kind of, right? Red Skull and these typical Marvel characters, to more just generic normal humans. And I had like my career highlight at Digital Domain was then more that I got the chance to sculpt Martin Luther King's head for a project Time magazine was actually coming up with. They wanted to do a VR experience where basically people can go to the museum, put on VR glasses, and just experience the speech of Martin Luther King and the whole march in VR. So I got the chance to work on that likeness. That was a pretty cool project because there is no scans. And we all want to, I don't know about the rest of the people, but usually if you're a character guy, it's always very refreshing not to have scans. And so, yeah, then my highlight ended up to be at the end on the Time magazine cover itself, which was kind of cool. And after that, I picked up a team lead on a show I can't talk about right now, but that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years, actually, where I'm managing, or my team and I'm managing 15 characters. But yeah, unfortunately can't tell more about that. But that's where I am at right now. And yeah, that's pretty much it, Adar. I don't know if you have any more questions or if there's anything more I have to talk about. Oh, and of course, I work with Think Tank since 2019 as an advanced term supervisor with students, and I'm mentoring students, which is a lot of fun for me because it's just great to see you guys like grow and become better, and just see like sometimes from the beginning term to the advanced term and then to mentorship, just the progress itself, which is very rewarding for me as well. And it's a never-ending learning for me too, because I learn from you students, and you learn from me, so it's great. That's pretty much it.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Adar.
Thanks, Raf. I have no more question in regards to that. I think you broke it down pretty well. Thank you. Okay, awesome. So next person is going to be Frederic Arsenault. Frederic, maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello. You guys can hear me? Awesome. Yeah, so my name is Frederic. Everybody calls me Fred. So yeah, I'm pretty much started my career in Vancouver, actually, but I'm a character artist from Edmonton right now. My career is actually a little interesting, the way it progressed. It's not what I would typically say a standard progression, I suppose. The way it happened for me was when I went to school back in Vancouver in basically, I think it was 2016. I was mainly focused on environment art. That was my main focus at the time, given the fact that my teachers kind of told me that character art was such a cutthroat industry. And maybe at the time, I didn't really want to throw myself into that too much. So I decided to kind of follow something that I felt was a bit more achievable at the time, given my skill set and whatnot. So I started doing some environment stuff, more prop related. I actually have a demo reel that was 100% environment based, and I applied for jobs with that pretty much everywhere. Then I got a job at Icon Creative Studio in downtown Vancouver. That was a great first experience right out of graduation, which was really nice. I didn't have to struggle as much as some others, which was great. Yeah, and then when I started there, basically I was responsible for a bunch of things. We started working on some kind of cartoony animated Netflix series, mainly targeted towards smaller kids and stuff. So it was a good introduction into stylized work, because in school I hadn't really done a lot of that stuff. It was mostly just realistic and trying to hit that kind of like ultra realistic bar that I was hoping to get to. But yeah, so doing a little bit more stylized stuff. Again, not doing anything character related. It was mostly just prop modeling, vehicle modeling, a little bit of set dressing, stuff like that. And then, funnily enough, what I was doing in my free time was kind of doing some character stuff just for fun. I just wanted to see what I could do, explore in terms of style and stuff, and just see, if I could have some fun with it. And I started doing some character stuff, and it actually got me noticed to an extent, which was interesting. So I participated actually in a ton of ArtStation challenges, which also was a great learning experience for me. The community, everything was super helpful, and everybody was very feedback oriented. So that kind of helped me push my character art a little further. So the way that progressed was, as I was doing stuff at Icon Creative Studio, everything kind of just organically developed. That I actually got an email from EA requesting to do an interview and a test. I had recently done a project at the time, and I thought to myself, hey, this was just for fun, and it actually got me an interview, so that was fun. So I did the interview, I did our test, everything went well. I got a few notes from my friend who actually worked there, so he kind of knew what was requested or wanted from them. So I did that. I got the job, started working at EA as a character artist on a rather large team of about 20 artists or so. We were a great group of people, tons of friends, lifelong friends. Everything was fun. So that was basically the beginning of the start of my character art career. It didn't really actually happen, nor did I really plan on it happening that way, but it did. And honestly, I've never really looked back. So from that point on, we were working on a rather stylized project at the time as well. So organically, again, I think it just developed into me being a stylized artist, character artist, to just at home work and at actual work. So so that's mainly what I specialize in now, is just stylized character, real-time character art. I do some realistic stuff to kind of like switch back and forth sometimes, to kind of just flex my muscles a little bit, just to make sure I'm not rusty and all in some departments, but mainly focused on stylized art. So after EA, I basically I had a goal to go back to Edmonton, which is my hometown, which is actually where I moved from. And then I stayed in Vancouver for about 3 years until I was able to actually get a job in Edmonton, or find a job in Edmonton. At the time, Edmonton, from what I knew, only had one major studio that I had a goal to kind of achieve to get to, and that was BioWare. And having only worked a couple of years in the industry, I still shot for it. I made a project completely targeting that studio and their art style. I think that they weren't hiring at the time, so I didn't actually get in, which is fine because it's BioWare and can't expect much. But I actually got picked up from another studio that opened literally the month that I applied, which was a huge coincidence. Like the month before I was about to move back, I had nothing lined up. I had seen that Improbable Canada had opened in Edmonton, which was a huge relief. I sent in the piece that I had done to send to BioWare to Improbable, and they actually hired me using that piece, seeing that piece. So it was a huge coincidence and huge opportunity for me. So I took it, flew down to Edmonton, had the interview process, and everything went well, and I've been there ever since. So been there for 3 years now. We don't necessarily specialize in stylized art, but it's kind of like in the middle realm. Middle ground, I would say, between realism and stylized. So it's a comfortable place for me to be, and I've had a blast ever since. But in my free time, I usually just do some stylized, just to kind of bring back the stuff that I used to do on a constant day-to-day basis. But for now, basically just doing kind of a little bit of everything. But that's pretty much my story. And I've been also working with Think Tank for a few terms here. This is my third term with Think Tank supervising. Again, I'm also mentoring on the side as well. Like Raf is awesome. the process of seeing what students are actually going through, considering honestly some of my experiences in school weren't that great, and I honestly think that the way Think Tank is working with stuff right now and the way it all pans out is really, really nice. And they expose this. I think there's some exposure to the students that I didn't get when I was in school, that I'm really kind of like, I'm kind of riding that high of like seeing them go through an experience that is actually really useful for them in the industry. And it's the whole experience has been awesome. So it's been a blast. So yeah, that's pretty much my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, no questions here. Let's move on to Chun Yang. Can you introduce yourself?
Can you guys hear me? So my name is Chun, and I'm originally from China. I also went to school in Vancouver. I wish I knew about Think Tank, but I didn't 10 years ago. So my entire career is basically in Vancouver, and mostly I am a textile artist my entire career. When I first finished school, my demo reel was, I wanted to work in film, but my demo reel ended up being a little bit more cartoony. And I think it's good to mention that I also didn't have any 3D experience when I started school, and school was only 1 year. So I kind of want to say that, don't worry if you don't have any 3D experience when you start school. If you work hard, if you put your work into it, you can definitely get a job afterwards. For me, I did get a job afterwards as in an animation studio, but I really want to get into film, so that's not really the job I want, but it's a good first step to just get into the industry and start to get some experience. But I know that when I was in the animation studio, that whatever I make in the studio is not going to help me, even though I have started to get production experience, but whatever I make is not going to help me get a job in a film studio. So I know that I had to work on my own personal project on the side if I ever want to build a brand new portfolio and for a different job. And I feel like that's kind of another good point to bring up, is that the more specific your portfolio is, the better. If you know exactly what the job is and you aim to tailor your portfolio that way, then you have the best chance of getting that job. And just like Fred said, he tailored his portfolio towards BioWare, and it happened. So I worked on my own personal project until it was kind of like good enough to get my first film job, which was Prime Focus, which doesn't kind of exist anymore. But once I got the first film credits, everything kind of just snowballs, and it's just easier to apply for the next job. And since then, I've been at Sony. I also went to Digital Domain. That's where I met Raffael. Actually, we worked together for a bit. and after that was ILM. You kind of just like snowball as you go. But I kind of do want to mention that even my job at Digital Domain, so I was at Prime Focus for my own personal portfolio. I got into Sony because of my own personal portfolio, and I got into DD because of my personal portfolio. Because working in film is that it takes a long time for the film to come out, so you could have a long time where you have nothing to show. So it's still, in terms of portfolio, you can have the experience, but you still have nothing to show to try to get the next job, maybe the better position or anything like that. So I know that keep working on my own personal project was the only way maybe I can progress my career a little faster instead of just keep waiting for that stuff to happen. So currently I'm still at ILM as a senior texture artist, but I kind of wanted to, after you work a same job, like position for a little while, gets a little stale, gets a little boring, and I was kind of looking for progress myself. So I actually started to kind of just make some tutorials. After you work for a while, you gain some experience, you have some certain ideas of how to do certain things. And I kind of just want to put that out there. Just like, okay, this is my idea, this is my workflow. I kind of want to share that with everybody, just see if it's helpful for anyone. So I actually started a YouTube channel, Archerism Digital, just making art tutorials on the side. And also, because of those tutorials, I actually really started to make way more personal work as well, which I thought was good for my own skill. And yeah, that's pretty much. I'm just working, making some tutorials, and also I'm a mentor at Think Tank as well. And I've been mentoring there for a few years, and I really enjoy talking to the students and review their portfolios and help them with their work. And I really like think tank because it's the specific goal we're talking about. Because all the students I work with, they know kind of have a clear goal of they want to get into film texturing, so that's why they come to me as a mentor. So it's actually very easy to create a good portfolio because everybody's goal is very specific and very laser focused. Where a lot of, I feel like other schools kind of aim for like more broad goal just to become a modeler, but or like a texture artist, where sometimes the portfolio, if you don't have, the goal is too broad, the portfolio is too kind of non-focused, it's actually very hard to get into a professional industry. Yeah, it's everything.
Awesome. Thanks, Chun. I just have to say that you guys should definitely check out Chun's YouTube channel. She's sharing a ton of amazing tutorials, and she's pumping them out like crazy. Really, really good and really valuable stuff. Thank you. All right, so we're just going to go right into that, into portfolio advice and reviewing. I already shared on our end with Raf. This is Joseph Kovac. I hope I'm saying your name right, Joseph. Thank you for sharing your portfolio with us. Just on a small note, I mean, we received a bunch of portfolios, and in case I haven't mentioned before, some of them were not exactly catered towards what we have today. So I'm sorry if we're skipping those things like concept art, which is not something that we're reviewing, or first term foundation in think tank is also something that is a bit early for this stage. And also, I've noticed some questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we can't receive more portfolios at this time. So let's start with Joseph Kovac. Raffael, can you take this one or begin with this one?
Yes, absolutely. So, and Chun and Fred, if you guys have some notes to it, just chime into it. So I'll start sharing my screen right now. Let's see if this all works. Cool. There you go. You guys can see my screen? I hope so, huh? Perfect. All right. Cool. So, Joseph, I mean, I was just looking at your Omega render here. I mean, there is not much I'm going to point out because I'm more a character guy, but I just love this piece because I've always wanted to model watches for some reason by myself and do a nice render, but I have never done it. But this is an absolute beautiful piece. So I'm not going to play it here. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but great work on that one. In general, I probably go more heavier on those ones here, but I start with this one as well because I think this is a great example of, I mean, I love like iron masks, but a tendency we always have to do in CG is unfortunately we over exaggerate sometimes the bump maps, right? And what I mean with this is just too much bump and generic, which adds like lets our projects or our work then sometimes drop into more like and like into more the 3D CG looking work. So this is something I always keep telling my students as well. Don't overdo the bump, right? The bump, sometimes we want it really specific, or we just want to add it with carefully applied displacement. But I find if just is a bump map applied really heavy, it can add a lot of like more towards the unrealism look. But yeah, that just as a side note here for this. Let me just see. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Cool. Just want to make sure that I'm not talking for like 3 minutes and I'm muted. All right, let's go back to your character work here. In general, guys, what is really important with character work. So this is a really cool base already. Love here the stitching, the details in the cloth, in the cloth fabric texture you have, and maybe Chun can chime in later on this as well, on like breakups in fabrics, because that's usually probably something the texture artists develop heavily, right, with Substance Designer and then Substance Painter or Mari or whatsoever. But for the face itself, the most important thing you guys have to put emphasis on is the base structure of a face. So if your head has to look good in a low resolution, it has to look good if you pull further out on the asset. And if it looks good there, then you're ready to apply detail. The details are just like a touch-up pass at the end, right? And something here, Joseph, for you, for your detail pass here as well, or just in general areas I would then touch up is like these little, like if you look at reference as example, we in rare cases we get these little just folds. They're more like fleshier pockets in general, but again, that's something you can compare nicely with reference onto. And something as well, what we do a lot is we sharpen up these lips far too much, right? So the lip lines end up to be very crisp. And that's totally normal because we look at this and we see the color breaks, right? The lip color, then to the skin color. And this gives us the impression that these lines are pretty sharp, but they're in most cases like a little bit rounder, a little bit fleshier. And what I recommend always, guys, if you get a chance, get some scan data. Go to 3D Scanster or wherever, get some scan data of heads and analyze those heads. There's two big things for me always. It's like you can read the brow structure much better because brow structures always get a little bit washed down because the eyebrows are on top. And we can read stuff like lip areas much better. We can analyze the facial details much better. And the cranium. Craniums are in general like an absolutely underdeveloped, craniums and ears are an absolute underdeveloped stage in most of the sculpts. And I personally always develop everything at the same time, and I'm only moving towards details or towards more refinement when my cranium or when my face nicely integrates into cranium. So I work for probably 3/4 of the time in like a pretty low resolution, and then step up from there. And I just add carefully resolution to it where I need it to then exaggerate the eye folds or get this eye structure better and so on. And for details, guys, one important thing is as well, like if you use Texture XYZ and you apply Texture XYZ, make sure you give this a little bit of pass in ZBrush or a Mudbox or just wherever you like to do some additional sculpting on, just to refine, because in a lot of cases, Texture XYZ works great on young faces, right? But as soon as you have a little bit more an aged character, we want to see a little bit more of that pore directionality, because usually we have a lot of pore directionality here. The forehead pores look different. And Joseph, in your case, you have this nicely already kind of put into place. But what we would need to do is we would just integrate it a little bit more better into with the skin details. We would probably need a little bit more pore depth in general, depending on the reference you've been using, a little bit more like a crisper nasolabial line, which then starts fading off as well at a certain point. And for your lips as well, right? If you look then at the lips in more details and more reference, we would see that they have these nice little almost pillows. And if you guys think about pillows and you sculpt, then you always kind of like try to have this nice roundness in it, the volumes, the fleshiness. And unfortunately with CG art, we end up really fast in a flat territory. So we just use age polish brushes or even just the smooth brush too strong, and it flattens out areas far too much. So, but again, scan data is your friend here, just not to copy exactly what you see, not to use it as a base structure to wrap onto, but at least as a reference point and a study point. And think about it like life drawing as well, right? If you go to life drawing, you study from a live object. So scan data is our digital artist tool to actually enhance our modeling skills or our observation skills in the digital realm. I don't know, you guys have something to add to here or something maybe I forgot?
I can talk a little bit about like the clothing sculpting detail here. As a texture artist, if you plan to actually texturing this, it's actually not a great idea to have the specific threads of fabric to be in your sculpt, because it's hard for that to match your texture. Because it would be better to actually have either create a like in Substance Designer have the displacement created there, or just a bump for things like clothing, this kind of fabric thing. Actually, bump is totally enough. We don't really need that much of a high information. The problem with that is to match the texture with what you already have there is difficult. Normally when we do that, let's say for like a creature, we want the texture to be matched the scale, whatever, we need to bake the creature with a proper cavity map or like an AO map, things like that to help us with texturing, so the texture and sculpting information actually match. But for something that detailed and refined, it's almost impossible to bake anything to help us. So then the thread of the color information and the height information is just not going to match, and it's difficult. So I see a lot of sculpting presentation have actual like thread detail like that small in them, but sometimes I think it looks nice as a model presentation. But practically, if you're really actually going to texture it and take it all the way to render, it will be actually better to do that kind of fine detail inside of texturing instead of sculpting.
Thanks, Chun. And I think just to add to this as well, the same is for the face, right, Chun? Like, I mean, usually, like when I'm doing face detail, I usually don't line up my pore maps with my diffuse maps, because my diffuse maps be either hand painted, be picked out of different parts of like actual different humans, and my displacement comes from somewhere else as well. So the only way I would actually match them is if you have a mole or like a pimple or like blackheads and stuff like that. But besides that, my diffuse doesn't perfectly line up with my pores or anything like that. The SSS shaders nowadays do such a great job in scattering this nicely in, and you get like beautiful shadows and all that stuff in there. So no need.
I have something to add as well, if that's all right. Yeah, so kind of echoing what you guys are saying too, in terms of the facial detail and stuff like that, and actually the detail overall. I think that's a common thing that I see a lot of the time, and I actually have said this many times to some of the students, is that throwing detail on a model that doesn't look quite finished isn't really going to make the model look any better. So detail isn't always something that's beneficial. If anything, it actually kind of pulls it back, because it gives the impression that you've kind of skipped a few steps or rushed a few steps to get to the detail pass, which some people think is the most important. It's like, look at all the pores I can do, look at the stitch work I can do. So it's just a matter of like maybe spending less time on that stuff, because that's the stuff that you can do at the end. That's a little easier to do once you have a really nice mesh, right, with a really nice face proportions and like underlying shape, like Raph was saying. So I think over detailing could be dangerous, but like I personally usually spend most of my time doing the block out, and that is probably to me the most crucial part of everything of this entire process, is just spending the block out, as much time on the block out as possible. And like Raph was saying as well, is progressively going up a subdivision and carefully going up as the detail goes. So because the first thing I noticed when I saw this is I saw the detail, but it almost drawed away, like it pulled away from the actual the overall look of everything. First thing I noticed was the detail on the lips, which to me, the intensity of the detail on the lips didn't quite match the overall detail that I was seeing everywhere else. So kind of a mismatch, but there's obviously an understanding of the process, which is good to see. I think it's just maybe reeling back and spending more time on the beginning steps than moving towards the end steps. So obviously gathering a crap ton of reference and spending a good amount of time understanding proportion and size and everything from all different angles, and just getting an understanding of how faces work and stuff like that. So I think, basically just emphasizing doing something, spending more time on the beginning steps than actually focusing on the details.
Yeah. Very, very good point. And just to wrap this up with a last note as well, what you said, Fred, is, and to support that basis idea as well, if you guys see your family members or friends, whatever, like from 200 meters away, 100 meters away, you already recognize them, right? So you got to ask yourself, what makes them recognizable? It's probably not the pore detail. It's probably their facial features, placement, proportions towards each other, and things like that. So that's why these sculpts have to just look spot on in a lower resolution, and then you move on from there. But I think, Joseph, in general, like you're absolutely on the proper track here with what you're doing, right? It's just like learning exactly these details and getting more into it, analyzing more reference, and study this. And you will benefit from studying scans as well. For me, that was a breakthrough. As I was confronted with so many head scans, I learned so much about pore directionality, about actual pore depth and details and how that all looks like and how wobbly a cranium can be and not too perfect, and also and so on, right? That's what we do every day, looking at these things and learning from it.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Joseph, for sharing that with us. I did mention that Joseph is in Austria, and he's interested in film, specifically character art. The next person is going to be Francesca. I'm going to say your full name. I hope I say it correctly. Francesca Loreto Tapia Morello. Francesca is from Chile. She's interested in film, texture painting, and look development. Chun, can you maybe start with that one? Awesome. Yeah, no problem, Joseph. Chun, do you need the link?
No, I got. Do you guys? Can you guys see my screen? Oops.
Yep.
Oh, cool. So I see Francesca. I can see this. I really like this character actually when I was looking at it. It's very nice color, and I think the general presentation is really pretty. I see you start to maybe change direction because everything I see so far is very stylized. So I think this is the main character that's more geared towards some more realistic style. I would say I really like your fabric material. It looks super cool, and I think the material itself is pretty spot on for the fabric. I like that you are doing your own fur. It's a pretty tricky thing to learn. I'm still kind of learning myself. In terms of texturing, I would say the tricky thing about texturing for realistic film is that you need a realistic model. Your texture, your skin, everything, you can use Texture XYZ, you can use all those kind of like helpful tools to try to create a realistic texture, but if your model itself is not realistic, it's still not gonna read realistic. So that's the tricky part for if you want to be a texture artist, is that either you maybe can find someone that has a very good model and they can collaborate with you, so you can put your texture on the model that's more realistic, or kind of just have to practice modeling as well. That's basically what I did for my own work. At work, I only do texturing. I don't really model like at all. At film, it's very specialized. So I know if I want to have any sort of personal work, I have to do my own modeling, and that's kind of forced me to kind of just get better at it. And so that's if you aim for a texture position for your portfolio, improving modeling is extremely important. Probably Raf and Fred can comment more on the modeling in a bit. For texturing itself, I would say in general, the skin is looking a little bit too waxy. It's a little bit too like a candle, or it's a little too see-through kind of material. Probably need a little bit less subsurface scattering. I can see you have done some pretty nice like pore detail here, but I think because the subsurface is so strong that we actually don't see them very much. The light just goes straight through, and any kind of surface detail, it's just get like blurred out, pretty much. Like I said, I kind of really like the fabric. I think the shader is looking really nice. I think the fur shader is looking really nice. For the leather, I would say the metal right now doesn't read very metal. Maybe it needs a little bit more shine to it. I see there's like kind of dark, like a black grunge in between those ornaments, but maybe above that, like the yellow part of it can have a little bit more shine, metal shine, which can create a really nice contrast between like the dark grunge and the metal, some kind of like a spec difference, roughness difference. And also I would say the same comment for the leather itself. Leather can get pretty shiny, can have kind of like broad white speck. And whenever we see that, we automatically recognize it as a leather. So it can also use a little bit more shine for the leather itself. I think it's probably the roughness map needs to be adjusted, most likely. A lot of the material quality is all depends on roughness map. So that would be one map that's really important to get right if you want the material to read right. That's all I have for it. If you guys have any comments.
I mean, I had pretty much the same as well regarding the skin. And I mean, the fact of having reference, just, I can't stress this enough, right? What I've seen a lot is in cases that when people or my students don't show me reference, I'm like, okay, show me what you're looking at, and then I'll point out what is missing. But if you don't look at anything, right? And that's like, I mean, but I'm pretty sure there was some solid reference here in this project. But as example for the metal shininess, and sometimes for these materials, it's just so key to have these references, and to get that spec, like Chun said, the roughness, right? And I mean, for the face itself, the only areas I would like, I mean, looking at this angle would be what I would tackling now is as well, probably would refine the ears, like sculpting wise. I would refine the lips a little bit. The philtrum right now, the philtrum is this little gap right here we have, right? I'm not sure I read this right now pretty parallel. So we have these two parallel lines coming down. It usually has a little bit like a trapezius shape to it. And then the lip has a little bit of gap. Not sure if that's wanted, but I would definitely resculpt the lips a little bit in their breakup. And something about the eyes, I probably would play with scaling them down a little bit just to see. Usually that's a test I always do on my own because we have a tendency to always sculpt eyes too big. I mean, at least myself. So I always, when I sculpt my eyes, I take them, scale them down a little bit. In most cases, I'm like, yeah, looks better. And something which is really important with the eyes is that we actually don't have gaps between the eyeball and the eyelid. What I see a lot is that eyelids get very pointy and round, too round almost, and we don't have that eyelid shelf established. So because you have that flat area, right, where the eyelids come together, and you got to be just flush to your eyeballs or you penetrate through your eyeballs. And in production, we would be absolutely perfect flush in facial modeling, but sometimes you just want to avoid that gap because it can give an unwanted deep shadow or some weird effects with subsurface scattering. But that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, and thanks, Francesca, for submitting your portfolio for feedback. The next person is Sergio Valandia from Colombia. He's interested in game character art, so I'm going to give it away to Fred.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me? All right. Awesome. Let's share the screen here. All right. Everybody see this? I should probably. There we go. Okay. Let's see here. So the first thing, my very first impression, actually, when I first see this is, this to me is targeted towards creatures. This is kind of like, again, just the first thing I see when I see the sculpts that are kind of going on. I was actually, when I saw this at first sight, I was looking for the game, what I would deem as the game art. And I immediately went to this one because this one jumped out to me, I think, immediately as this could potentially be a game-ready piece here. So when I'm looking at this generally, when I opened this actually and I took a look at it, it kind of fit all of the criteria that I was hoping to see. Essentially, is a nice breakdown of overall, a good presentation, and a nice breakdown of what actually was done in the whole process. What's important for a lot of employers, for me as well, is to see that there's an understanding of the process, that of what is actually going on, because a lot of the time people present these characters and whatnot, and they don't actually show the steps that were involved and what they actually did. That there's kind of like an understanding of well, as I go down here, you can see that there's some nice close-up shots showing looks like some detail on the hands and stuff. But then there's this stuff which I find extremely useful, right? This is the technical stuff that you don't necessarily usually show right off the bat. This is the stuff that I look for, understanding of clean topology, something that would be game ready for animation and stuff like that, and just a clear understanding of keeping topology nice and clean. Personally, I'm huge on topology. I actually am probably one of the rare people that actually love doing topology. So I look at this and I'm very picky with what I look for. And this is a great first impression for me. I think there's a very clear understanding that less is more. So there's the basic understanding of making sure basically the forms are supported, right? And there's an understanding of animation as well too. So having all the edge loops in the right spot, which is really important. So like the elbows, and then you got enough edge loops to support major deformation. So that's awesome to see. And then obviously included a marmoset scene, which is also great. Being able to kind of go in there and kind of get a better understanding of the maps and what's actually being done. Again, more detail is better. So yeah, obviously taking a look at these maps and stuff. So that's great to see. So yeah, if I continue down again, more is better, right? So just you're showing your shader setup, you're showing your marmoset scene, your lighting, all that stuff, some sculpting breakdowns. That's awesome. That's great. And then showing the concept. That's exactly what I would look for. So going back to the portfolio, so that was my first impression, is like, okay, this is a creature kind of demo reel, which is totally fine. Actually, what I would say would be beneficial for someone, for you, Sergio, when you have a portfolio like this, like I said, it's really targeting creatures, and there's a lot of ways you can go with this in my mind. Like there is a way that you could basically making a career with being a creature character artist, right? That thing that does exist, and you can also be a creature concept artist, right? So a digital concept artist essentially. So this to me, these pieces here are top notch. I think they're really nice, especially if they're original pieces, like coming from your imagination, which is always more difficult to do. So yeah, like the ones that come out stand out to me are these ones here, and some of the more I would say quote unquote weird ones, because I like those kinds of projects. Let me just quit this one here. So yeah, like again, clean presentation, good understanding of anatomy, really nice, just kind of weird concept, which I always love to see. It's an interesting presentation with this really, with this material on the crown and stuff. So again, not breaking down the process of doing the characters, but again, you're showing your strong ability to sculpt, which is a huge benefit. This one's really cool too. Again, some pretty interesting shapes. And again, I don't think there's an over reliance on detail in this one, which is good. There's a very good understanding that the shapes are kind of what are driving this, which is also super important. Yeah, stuff like this is also cool, but you know what I mean? Like from a let's say I'm a recruiter, what I would be looking for is something that would be tailored to kind of the work that we're looking for in studio. So this to me obviously doesn't scream stylized by any means. There is some stylization within it. So, I mean, that's kind of like a tricky subject to kind of talk about, but there is some style in the realism and the kind of the crazy creature work that I'm seeing in here. So what I would think when I'm first seeing this is, if I'm looking at stuff like this person would be a great addition to a creature team. Or even like I said, a concept sculpting team, something like that. So there's a lot of ways to kind of diverge the path, I guess. So yeah, so what I would recommend though, I mean, if it's a game from a game character perspective, I would probably add more of these projects here, really breaking down everything. So some of the benefits of doing this is that you could publish a piece like this and maybe just do like the beauty renders and whatnot. And then after that, maybe make a separate post, kind of really breaking down every aspect of what you went through to get to this result. Because most likely when you get into an interview, they'll ask you questions like, how comfortable are you with this and whatnot. And I think you want to leave the least amount of guessing as possible when it actually comes to the interview process. and get this kind of stuff going as early as possible, the information to be known as early as possible. So really making it clear that you understand the workflow, you understand the whole process. Clearly what I'm seeing here is that you have a strong ability with sculpting, and that is obviously not a problem in like at all from these pieces. This is some really interesting stuff here. So definitely not struggling in the art department. I think maybe not necessarily quote unquote struggling, but like lacking a little bit of presentation of the knowledge of game ready assets. So that's honestly my main feedback, I think, from seeing this, because this is a super strong portfolio, but it screams one thing that maybe isn't the full intention from at least a game character perspective. This, is obviously more of like a sculpting portfolio. So again, super strong, maybe not what you were expecting it to be, essentially. So yeah, that's, I don't know if you guys have any other additional points.
You covered pretty much everything, and especially what you mentioned as well regarding topology is an absolute important point, and I can't stress that enough as well, because the thing is, if we look at portfolios as example for modelers or facial modelers, or even more for facial modeling stuff, you have to be even more pickier, especially for cleanness in even invisible areas in the faces. But from a topology perspective in general, guys, series meshing is just not a way to go for it. I mean, I'm okay with using it, but then refining it to make it properly work. But if you select your loops and you get spiraling and stuff like that, and we will see series mesh, we will, because series mesh always adds weird termination of loops in areas where you like, why is that? Why would you terminate certain loops at that area? Because there is no, and especially if there is no geometry or sculpt to support by the topology, right? So series mesh is usually something, if I see series meshed in a portfolio or like in an applicant, and I have somebody who doesn't series mesh and has clean, nicely laid out topology, that person is definitely a step ahead. So keep that in mind. And I think, Joseph, for you as well, what he said with presentation, it would be nice to see as well little breakdowns on like adding the topology, because topology, if you guys start as a modeler, is key. That's what we want to see. Don't care about if you start as a texture artist or look dev or something else, but as a modeler, if you want to start as a modeler, we want to see what we see right here.
Someone asked a very relevant question regarding presentation. What is the main thing that you look at? For example, process or breakdown, etc.
Sorry, for presentation, honestly, a lot of everything. Personally, I love to see a clean result. Obviously, that is the main aspect of like the work involved. Is like you can have a beautiful piece, but for me, honestly, it's a little bit. Breakdowns are a little bit underrated. I think that it really that's the meat of the work. Really, like this is a beautiful render, but if it was just this, I would be less impressed than if it was a piece that was maybe slightly less good than this, but actually showed the process and isn't shy to kind of show all of that stuff and learn from it, right? Because nobody's a perfect artist, and I think everybody's always willing to learn. So having that exposure of or that transparency of showing, okay, well, this is where I'm at now. This is what I can do. That's a really strong thing to have. And you can do it. You can be a little flair, like you can have some flair with your presentation too, right? To show some style, so, I like the addition of like the little title and stuff like that, and developing a theme and stuff like that. So obviously presentation, breakdowns are important, but like even pushing it to the next step, to the next level, and doing something where there's a theme, and then there's a little bit more of like it stands out a little bit more, right? So, like personally, having participated in some ArtStation challenges, I think what's really important is, with everybody competing at the same time, is the goal is to make yours stand out and have yours be kind of like the one to look at. So, simple is also better. Like don't overdo it, right? Like I think a simple background like this is a good idea. Maybe a subtle podium would be something good too, but like maybe sometimes making like a full environment to kind of have your character live in is not necessarily like the best thing, and it'll maybe kind of detract from the actual presentation of the character. So you have, like in this case, Sergio has a really nice balance of presentation and focusing on what is important, which is the character, obviously. So I think that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind, is just to not go too far and overdo it, because that is also difficult. So finding a comfortable middle ground with presentation is very important. But yeah, I've seen a lot of, maybe junior artists kind of adding a ton of filters to their images, titles everywhere, like graininess everywhere. Like it's just overdoing it. And it's kind of like, again, taking away from the actual character, because you won't actually be doing any of that stuff in studio. So, and employers only actually care about, the cleanliness of the work and your understanding of the steps and, your general knowledge, essentially. So yeah, this is a good example of presentation. I would push it a little bit further by maybe showing your maps. I mean, you have the marmoset scene, but like showing your map in a flat mode, and kind of like doing an exact poly count breakdown, because I know you have, again, the marmoset scene, which is super useful, but really full transparency on everything. And I think a lot of employers will approve of that transparency. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, one tiny thing that I wanted to add, and thanks, you actually added that at the end there, Fred, is the fact that you can add a marmoset scene to ArtStation, which is really, really cool. So you can really see the model rotate and also see the channels and maps. But I personally totally agree with like actual frames and breakdown of the maps and stuff like that, so you can actually see everything. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sergio, and thanks, guys, for responding to that. The next person on the list is Daniel Rodriguez. He is from Mexico. He's interested in film character art. He is also a think tank student. Right now, recently entered his mentorship stage, so finished the advanced term. I believe it was with Tony, right? Not with yourself, Ref.
I was just looking at Daniel's stuff and I was like, this looks like scrolling through this portfolio looks like I'm scrolling through DD's internal asset system, because I mean, this adds really nicely into presentation. And I was as well like, this looks like that could be Tony involved. So I don't know if he was, but I guess, Daniel, he was your advanced mentor student, because you weren't with me. So I guess Tony was the only one other doing advanced. So must have been with him. All right, let's share screen here. So basically, I mean, this is an example of amazing presentation, and especially the playing around or doing different HDRI setups. These different HDRI setups show really nicely how materials work in different setups. So, and scrolling through this, I mean, honestly, I don't have a lot of notes, because this is a higher presentation. And even looking through this here, I mean, the only tiny thing I could spot was like basically, no, I mean, it looks great. It's just well presented. And the only tiny thing here, maybe in the back, where I'm like, okay, we have these scratch marks here. They look potentially a little bit procedural at that point. It comes down to the area as well. Like, this seems to be a kind of a protected area. And I always do my bump maps or wear and tear maps based on think about what the character is doing and what would touch him there or what would cause these scratches. But honestly, I mean, that's such a detail. This wouldn't make any decisions regarding hiring or not hiring, so that has no influence. And in general here, beautiful topology, absolutely clean laid out. This is what I want to see. And if I see something like that, this shows me solid topology skills. And especially looking at things like, and that's what you guys want to aim for as well, right? That these loops kind of, to a certain degree, if it's separate pieces, that they nicely line up towards each other, and we have them even lining up through here. So this is all nicely follow through loops. The advantage of this is if you guys have lined up loops into even separate pieces, is it's easier for rigging as well. And because sometimes, let's say you have just 3 loops here, and then you have multiple loops coming here in this piece, they would just deform weird, right? So the evenness in topology comes back to what Fred said as well. Super important, having this nice and clean. And looking at this is, for me, like showcases everything I need as a modeler. If I see something like that, this is ready to go, good to go for basically pretty much what we do at work, right? And Tony, I work with Tony, and he's working in my team as well at Digital Domain, so his understanding is absolutely solid. And yeah, nice breakdown of RGB masks and maps. And then as well, just going through here, nice lighting setup, presentation from all angles, the wrinkles, everything, the posture, dynamics, all working nicely. And even a pose, UV texture checker map applied. We can see the cleanness of the UVs, which is nice as well, because that's another thing, right? UV still, especially, I don't know, Chun, if you want to chime in this, but at Digital Domain, as example, the modelers do the UVs. And I guess sometimes in some cases, people do UVs different, and I always try to accommodate my UVs to the texture artist. So having a quick chat with the texture artist as well, just like, hey, do you have any preferences or whatsoever, helps as well. But this shows a nice clean UV layout, nice breakdown here through the glossiness, normal maps. And I mean, yeah, just there's no critique on my end, just then like this is an amazing example portfolio down to the topology. And as well, guys, don't shy back on a little bit higher resolution in your faces, because I see still sometimes faces, I mean, this is different in games, I have to say. But at facial, or no, even my project right now where we do stuff for Unreal Engine, we work with this resolution for Unreal Engine. And you don't have to shy back, because the advantage of higher resolutions in your faces is as well you can sculpt in Maya. And we do, as example, all blend shape sculpting in Maya and Mudbox. So we never use ZBrush, or rarely, no, I've never used ZBrush for blend shape sculpting at Digital Domain. And we have a very high fidelity workflow in regards to that. And yeah, so, but here, Mari breakdowns, UV layout breakdowns, nice and clean, looks almost like, I guess it's laid down by the material. Reference, schedule, list, great. I don't know, you guys have something to chime in here, but I think there is nothing I would say you could do better.
Oh yeah, this looks great, yeah. Even down to the schedule.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, exactly. I don't think I've ever seen somebody break down a schedule, so that's like extra awesome. So.
And just to add to the schedule, guys, like this is your roadmap. I've been doing that with my students always in advanced on mentorship. I want you guys to use Miro. Miro is a great tool to break your projects down, because you have a clear roadmap to your goal. And with a project like that, it is so much stuff on it. You want to know what you have to sculpt. And with this, you have your tiny miniature goals as well, right? You start with one asset, you cross it through, cross it through, cross it through. It's always a little feeling of success, done, 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 done. And eventually, you know, by down here or by down here, you're done. You just have to follow your plan. And that gets you there.
Yeah, adding to that's super important. Like, this is actually my favorite image of the entire thing, because this has such a clear understanding of what is to come for the industry. And if you don't know this, I mean, time management is like, I've preached this like crazy, and this is something that I feel is completely underrated, because you're going to get to a point where you're going to have to balance life and work and family and whatever, everything, and projects like this where you might have to do stuff at home and whatever, but like deadlines are a fact of life, and seeing this is like the most amount of conditioning I think I've ever seen someone actually go through, which is super cool to see. So I wish more people actually did this and were as structured as this. And I think we would, I think this would be an instant hire for me, I would say.
Immediately. Oh, personality, of course, is a big part of it, right? Sometimes personality, if you have too much ego, too much attitude, then your work can't be as good as it wants to be. If you're not a fit in the team, it doesn't work, right? So personality is always a big part in this as well, but just work-wise here, instant hire, yeah. Totally. Cool. That's it from this side here, I would say.
Awesome. All right, moving on. Thank you so much, Daniel, for this. So the next person, her name is Mina Halim Ibrahim from Egypt. She's interested in film, environment, and prop art. So Mina provided us with actually a video. Chun, would you mind taking that one?
Can you guys see it? Okay. So I'm just gonna scrub through.
Chun, can you scale it up to full screen?
Sure.
Awesome.
Okay. So yeah, it's always, if you actually have footage that you already was in other projects, it's always nice to show a demo reel like this. The only downside is, everything's moving so fast and I can only see the stills if I stop it, and the resolution of the stills is going to be limited because it's in a video. So it's always going to be helpful if you actually have another website to have those high resolution stills in another place where people can actually take a closer look at. So I want to comment on the car first. So for the car, I would say I will leave the modeling to the modeling guys. I'm just going to comment on the texture. For me, it's nice to see, the splash of mud, kind of like dirt you're trying to do. The only comment I would say, like, be careful of the resolution. Those things, the bits of the dirt is looking a little bit big. So, and also I feel like it needs a little bit more variation. When something like a mud splash and got dry, in general, you will have like clumps, and maybe you will have like splash detail. And then you have some area that will have the smaller little bits of mud that are spread out after the main probably impact area. So in general, I feel like it needs a little bit of variation of the size of different clumps and smaller bits. And also, the material of the mud is kind of uniform as well. It's all just dry mud, where I feel like in general, you will have a dry area, but you will also have like a wet area. There will be, if something is this dirty, got this much dirt on it, it will be a few different kind of dirt on this entire object. Maybe some wetness, maybe some other type of grunge, and it will make you feel like, okay, this thing can actually get this dirty, probably encounter other things as well, not just mud. For the car material itself, personally, I feel like there are two main type of car material. One is matte black, like things like Spider-Man's tank. It's matte, it's black, it's not very shiny. Or the most typical thing we see with cars is the coated paint. For this guy, it's kind of like in the middle. It's definitely not coated paint, but it's kind of like sheened metal on top. I'm not the huge car person, so I don't know if like there's cars like that out there. So in this case, if you believe that, okay, I really match my reference and this is exactly what I saw, then it will be helpful to have your reference next to it. So people know exactly what you are aiming for. And so people, wouldn't argue, oh, okay, I never seen this type of car paint before. And maybe is that a mistake, or is it just because I never seen that type of car paint before? So it'll be helpful to have a reference. I think that's a no for general. Any kind of film demo reel is extremely important to have a reference. We try to create something that's more realistic, and it'll be nice to have that next to it to show off how well you capture like the realism. So we have a few other props here. This guy is actually looking really cool. And I like how this one, actually the underneath grunge is actually looking really cool for that kind of structure. I like how I can see all the drips, and there's actually quite a bit of a color variation on that object. nice breakup, so I like that. The only thing I will come is that everything looks extremely rusted and red, where it would be more realistic if we, because originally they are all just like regular metals and they get rusted through time. So it wouldn't make sense for everything to be so red. It would still be nice to have a few metals that's like more pristine, something that hasn't been rusted yet. And it would be nice to see how the rust is started to come up on some pieces. Let's see, next one. I see there's quite a few environment work. For this guy, my general comment is the presentation and the lighting. I feel like it seems like that is a rendered a lit scene, but at the same time, we don't get any contactor. The lighting direction is not very clear. Everything is very diffused, or unless this is like a diffuse map. Oh, okay. Is that a... Oh, that's substance material. Okay, so it is a material. Yeah, I will say the lighting is not really helping the material right now. We don't get any spec. Everything looks super flat. It almost feels like it could be just like a diffuse map on its own. Like, I think that's inside of like this rock, and this area is like a room inside, right? And we don't get any kind of shadow inside, so it's almost look like this plane and this plane is on the same level. It's actually confused me for a sec if that's like a room or not. So definitely be careful if you're showing off the material. Definitely make sure the lighting is looking nice so we can actually see the material properly. I do like these plants. They look really cool. So it's background buildings. They're very cool. Yeah, we do that a lot at work. Sometimes just have to build big environments and with a lot of those buildings. I feel like this will be the same comment as before. It's just everything is so rusted that I don't see any original metal anymore. Adding those kind of like cleaner metal just adds a layer to like the color variation. You will have something red, maybe you have something darker, maybe another different, maybe there's kind of like more silver looking metal into it. Besides it's about like what's making sense in real life. It's also about having variation. You will have something a little bit darker, you have something a little bit brighter and wider, plus the red. It will just look more interesting in general. Is that very cool?
And just to add, like I love the fidelity in the models as well. Like so cool in some parts, like how detailed they've been modeled and things like that. Really nice.
Yeah, for sure. See, there's a lot of actual project real here. It's not just personal work for sure. Oh, it's nice to have the actual reference next to it. It's actually easier for me to comment on as well. For this guy, I will say the model itself is looking really cool. The material itself, I would say I can see that you're trying to copy this kind of like white damage grunge, maybe the copper that's on top of the copper. The biggest note I will say is that it's very soft and blurry compared to what's on here. The actual what's on the reference is there is blurry part, but there's a very sharp part. There's a lot of variation inside of this mask for this material. There's blurry part, there's sharper part, there's a clumpy part, there's like a breakup part. Be able to capture all those subtle details would make a huge difference. And right now I feel like everything's kind of blurry, kind of similar. I do see there's some like sharper area, but we're probably gonna need more of that to properly capture that. Yeah, so there's a lot of cool environment modeling in this. For the modeling part, do you guys want me to scroll to a certain area? To, if any of you want to comment on something?
Well, I'd like to just mention that we only have 8 minutes left, so maybe we should use the time to maybe get some questions, and maybe we were able to answer some questions from the chat. Is that okay by you guys?
Yeah, sure,
Yes.
works for me.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you, Mina, for sharing that. So we have a ton more portfolios. I wish I had time. We had time for them all. I'm so sorry that that we can't go over everything. We did receive a lot. So I think that in the next 7 minutes, maybe you guys have some questions that we can ask the artists. Please feel free to ask. All right, so one question is, if we work on anything based off a reference, should we include an image of the reference in our renders, or is it sufficient to just have the concept included in description of project?
I have something about that. Yeah, I think that adding that reference is super important, honestly, because sometimes there is a misalignment with what reference you're actually gathering, and it might actually kind of make you go in the wrong direction. So I was going back with transparency. I think that is a good thing to add. But yeah, definitely adding as much as not just the concept. Again, it's just an extra little bit of information for someone to look at and be like, okay, so this is what the information that they are seeing and how they're interpreting it in their work. Maybe there's a disconnect there happening, or maybe not, right? Like you can see that there's an understanding of what they're seeing versus what they're doing. So absolutely, I think that's super important to have that kind of transparency as well with the reference.
I kind of want to add that, and also make it as easy as possible for people. If you when you show people something and you have your work and reference right next to it, that's the best. Because you don't want someone to have to go into like a description, try to find it, try to open another link, try to do all that. Like I'll go through so many portfolio in a day. It's very likely they're not going to do it. So make it as easy as possible for people to be able to look at your work properly.
Yeah, that side by side comparison is super important. You can totally tell where the disconnect is. Yeah, every time someone sculpts a character in ZBrush, I always tell them to bring in their reference, put it side by side, and just compare, because it's funny, because even having it on a separate screen, for example, could give you that visual disconnect, as opposed to having it right next to it and doing like a flick of the eye, just going back and forth and seeing, even doing like a superimposed image or like your sculpt on top of your image, and then kind of comparing there. But yeah, it has to be checked constantly.
Yeah, especially in the work in progress phase, right? For me, as example, if I look at like a final render of like a likeness, I don't care if reference is in there or not. I see right away if it hits or not, right? So, and especially I would say it's based on your discipline. If you apply for texturing positions or look def, it's definitely nice to showcase, hey, this is what I tried to copy and this is what it looks like. Yeah.
All right, so next question. Wait, where was it? What's the best way to understand what the studio is looking for?
I think just doing some history research, looking at their current projects, older projects, what they've been releasing, studying the games. I know games are games and you want to play them, but I would say like opening, for example, I'm saying from a game studio perspective, if you're actually going to go into a game and start like walking around assessing the assets, like taking 20 minutes away from actually playing the game and just looking at the work involved. I think that's a thing that a lot of people probably don't do, but spending time to just evaluate what they want through from their actual already released projects and stuff like that. So, and what they're advertising as or even like maybe who's working for them, and then going to look at those artists' portfolio and seeing how potentially they got the job there, and how it could relate to them. Definitely.
All right, I'm going to skip some questions just to get some variety with the questions. What do you recommend for a material artist portfolio? Like showing just the material, spheres, or the materials being applied to a 3D model?
I mean, Chun, maybe you can take it, but yeah.
I feel like it's hard. It will always be better if it's on the actual object to be able to see, in context, how it will work. And I feel like a lot of times I see a lot of portfolio on ArtStation is the substance designer shader balls, But as someone like people that actually work in a studio that actually have to produce like a final asset or whatever, those things not necessarily gonna work. It can look very nice on the ball, but when you actually tile it, try to put it on something, they're not necessarily always gonna look good. So for us, it's like it's nice to see that, but it doesn't convince me that it's gonna do the job.
Yeah, agree. Totally. It always looks better on something we can relate to, right? If we look at a real object, it's like, oh yeah, this is how we associate to see it in real life.
All right, last question for now. Roy, I know you wanted to see an environment art specifically in games. That was the next on the list. Unfortunately, we didn't have time for that. So Roy's question is, what are some things you like to see in game environment art, portfolios, breakdowns? Typically, there are a lot of props, textures, etc. So breaking down everything can look crazy.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was looking at the portfolio that was submitted, and I like general notes. I think like from an environment perspective is I know there's an over-reliance. Sometimes there's an over-reliance on being optimized, right? Like in making sure everything is really nice and reusable, and the textures are optimal and all that stuff. But I feel like sometimes people shy away from actually adding a little bit more to resolution to things just because they're afraid. It's like it's games. I got to crunch it down to as low as I possibly can to make it work. That's not always the case. And sometimes the art actually suffers because of the over optimization of some assets. So showing that you're not necessarily afraid to kind of add a little bit more resolution, but while being like while it being logical, like don't start throwing polys at things and just willy-nilly everything, but making sure that everything actually has a reason for it. So that's why, again, topology breakdowns are super important, because you can tell exactly what the thought process was for the person making the asset, and seeing how they actually distributed the detail, whether it's in the texture, in the model, or whatnot. So and also making it not seem like I can clearly tell where the faceting is, I can clearly tell where the seams are, stuff like that. So being I think with environment art specifically for me is just a clean presentation and understanding of an efficient workflow, and not making it look like it's a model. Like you can see the faces, the individual faces and the edges, and giving things a nice bevel if they have to, because so that the light can read really nicely and overall just fit in the environment really well. So yeah, just being efficient with your workflow pretty much.
All right, so we're pretty much out of time, and I know some of these guys really have to go. I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, again, for participating and joining us and asking these wonderful questions and submitting your portfolios. Hopefully, we'll get to do another one of these with ArtStation sometime in the future. Thank you so much for ArtStation for hosting this. This was awesome. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions, if you like to know anything at all about the school. My email is adar@tttc.ca. I just posted it in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out if you need anything at all. Good luck to everybody. We can't wait to see you guys around, and we'll probably work with some of you in the future. All right.
Sounds good. Bye, guys.
Hi, guys.
See ya.
See you guys.